Hello everyone, my name is Tadas Vinokora. Welcome to yet another installment of Flickr Theory Reviews. Today, I will discuss Baudrillard's book called Seduction. Baudrillard is one of the main thinkers who could be characterized as postmodern. If you're thinking that technology is gradually overwhelming the society, if you feel like a non-person because you can no longer relate to other human beings without some kind of a mediation, or maybe you are feeling a tad alienated from the reality because of all that media, data, information, television, video games, virtual reality, and the rest of such phenomena, well, then Baudrillard is your guy. He's not some sort of a postmodern Lucifer. You don't have to be afraid of Baudrillard. In this book, called Seduction, Baudrillard expounds on his usual stuff. That is, simulation, simulacra, hyperreal, the society of the spectacle, as Debar would have called it. But he also turns to a more political and more literary kind of a discourse. Seduction, the book, is a turning point for Baudrillard. For a short while, Baudrillard puts the sociology aside and talks about the exciting thing. The exciting thing that people want to hear about: desire, sex, pornography, art, and illusion. So, for me, this book stands right up there with Bard's Pleasure of the Text, Deleuze's Masochism, Foucault's History of Sexuality, maybe Kierkegaard's Diary of the Seducer, maybe even Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals. This book, Seduction, it is a good, sensual, thought-provoking examination of seduction as a philosophical, cultural, and political theme. Within this book, there's a lot of lust, craving, and savage appetite, which is good because, who has time for sexual frigidity? This book makes you think about Casanova, Sade, Wilkes, the book My Secret Life, Clemen's Fanny Hill, and in general, you want to think about the libertine lifestyle and adventures. However, within this book, for Baudrillard, it's not that simple. Baudrillard is not describing a libertine sexuality. Rather, he says that in today's society, libertine sexuality is the norm, and therefore we can no longer be seduced. And we'll talk about what it means to be seduced in today's world. Even though today we have a lot of freedom, we are even motivated to lead libertine, hedonistic lifestyle. The topic of seduction is often left unscrutinized compared to libertine, cold, impersonal form of desire, or as Baudrillard calls, perverse lifestyle. Seduction as a theme is based on yearning, illusion, loss, and play, which makes it a little bit more tragic or revolutionary, if you will. It makes it more real. And let's not forget, real is something we don't get to play with within the postmodern society. So let's review the main points of this mischievous book. Baudrillard begins with the discussion of enigma, a mystical picture of the feminine figure which, under the influence of the first and second feminism, with people like Virginia Woolf, Simone de Beauvoir, later with Mary Ellman, Gail Millett, and many, many others, the enigma of a woman got devastated. It was totally destroyed, which is, in my opinion, actually a good thing. Because women are no longer treated as pure muses, goddesses, or witches, or femme fatales, but also as people, which is, how radical is that? Women, people? But for Baudrillard, there's some problems with the demystification of women. First of all, for him, female liberation through psychoanalysis, or analysis in general, through this Mulvey-esque male gaze, seems absolutely bogus. Because it is all nonetheless about commiseration. It is about feeling pity for women, patronizing them, treating them as burdens. Next, even though we no longer treat women as goddesses, the current gender situation is even worse for Baudrillard. Women are treated worse than an enigma. Women are treated as means to logistics of pleasure. Imagine an industrial conveyor of pleasure. That's what you should imagine right now. There are no more secrets to women, no uncertainty. Woman is rendered emblematic of orgasm, and orgasm is rendered emblematic of sexuality for Baudrillard. No more secrets. No more secrets. I'm going to repeat it again. No more secrets. There ought to be some secrets if seduction is to persevere. Needless to say, Baudrillard received a lot of criticism for all of this from feminist circles. I myself also, I'm not fully convinced as far as the female liberation part of his book is concerned. However, Baudrillard's train of thought is clear. Postmodern society is a society of the frenzy, a frenzy of unlimited sex. Women were taught to demand nothing, used to be that case, in order that they desired nothing. Now women, according to Baudrillard, are taught to demand everything in order to desire nothing. In very simplistic terms, if everything is revealed, if the imperative is to simply enjoy without much effort, there can be no seduction, no desire. We are left with pure, sod-like perversion. Nowadays, you simply have to enjoy. That's all there is to it, according to Baudrillard. You simply have to enjoy. That's the imperative. If we talk about the real sexual experience, that sexual experience is no longer taken seriously, according to Baudrillard. For Baudrillard, it used to be the case that seduction functioned by utilizing women's lingerie, lace, stockings, sex games, and ruses. Nowadays, seduction only functions as an ironic foreplay, endless game of defiance, hypocrisy, sarcasm, and play, but no real experiences. No real experiences. Baudrillard says there is no more referentiality of sex. And why would there be? After all, postmodern society rendered sex hyperreal. So what role does hyperreal play in this book? I think Baudrillard arrives at hyperreal by discussing pornography. Because pornography is better than the real sex of the olden days, The real sex is rather quaint if we think about it. Simulated sex is more real than real for Baudrillard. Remember what Malcolm McDowell in the Clockwork Orange said. It's funny how blood isn't really blood until you video it on the screen. So what Baudrillard is saying is that it's funny how sex isn't real until you watch it on the screen. Let's be honest. Sex on the screen is simply better. There's more color, luster, more decorations, mannerisms, and it happens all in high fidelity. When you're presented with a pornographic material or just any kind of explicit material, cultural explicit material, you're given more than you expected to receive at the first place, and in that way, according to Baudrillard, postmodern society takes away everything. When you are overfed, you are unaware of your desire. You can't even imagine that there might be something else, a more real experience, more seductive, painful even experience, an experience that would thrust you into an undertaking, ambiguity, a Hamlet-like questioning. So for Baudrillard, pornography is the quadraphonics of sex. It is hyperreal, better than sexual experience. we ever had. You can't distinguish between simulated content and real content no more. For Baudrillard, this means that we are engaged in orgy of production. Desire became a product, and this desire, like any other commodity, is being fabricated, disseminated, and reproduced again and again, again and again, 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 again. Coming back to seduction. If, like it is within pornography, everything is revealed, there are no secrets and therefore no genuine sense of seduction. Real starts the real. The reality, the Kantian noumenon, starts to consume us, and when the real will be universal, there will be death, Baudrillard says, which basically means that people are incapable of libidinal attachments and rather prefer simulated ways of attaining pleasure. By merging with simulations, people are merging with the real, they're forgetting what it means to be human. Human is then a dying species, according to Baudrillard. According to Baudrillard, everything is materialized in accord with the most objective categories. This is a pornographic culture par excellence. Pornographic is hyper-real, and our sexualities are that of premature ejaculation. We are like the narcissist guy. We are constantly looking at our own reflection, and we can't do anything else. We are caught up in this stupendous self-reflection. Hence, he says, Baudrillard, and I'm going to quote him right now, nobody no longer says, you have a soul and it must be saved, but they say, you have a sex and you must put it to good use. You have an unconscious and you must let the id speak. You have a body and you must derive pleasure from it. You have a libido and you must expend it. I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, let's talk about seduction, since we know already that we are losing all cultural sexual connections with the theme of seduction, as Baudrillard says. In seduction, human being is able to turn the manifest discourse at its most superficial, back on the deeper order. Seduction is able to question the norm, the dogma, the imperative, the substructure, by invalidating all of these, by substituting the illusion of appearances for the deeper order. However, in the case of seduction, as opposed to hyperreal society of the spectacle and pornography, the stakes are real, and it may just hurt the person. The person may become susceptible to the real experience. The real experience might become shocking. And Baudrillard is intrigued by the magic, playful, sensual ritual that is the seduction. To seduce, says Baudrillard, is to die as reality and reconstitute oneself as illusion. Seduction happens when the person trusts her own illusion and moves in an enchanted world. Narcissus, he too loses himself in his own illusory image. That's why he turns from his truth and by example turns other from their truth. Within seduction, you suspend your truths and meaning, you turn away from truth, and you finally become aware of what it means to love. Live in illusion. You live in illusion when you love, according at least to Baudrillard. Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard. So even though seduction produces illusions, it nonetheless obtains all powers. It can render bourgeois power and production irrelevant, meaningless, and weak, illusionary. Seduction only produces illusions, but by doing so, it obtains all powers, including the power to return production and reality to their fundamental illusion. Seduction is a sort of an alternative to the bourgeois production. It is a play with appearances. Therefore, it is not just the production of explicit raw content. It is a consolidation of the most fundamental power, the power to force bourgeois production and power look meaningless and weak, and illusionary. Later in his book, Baudrillard discusses an art technique that uses realistic imagery to create optical illusions and which exists in 3 dimensions. The name of it in French being trompe-l'œil. By discussing trompe-l'œil, Baudrillard arrives at his theory of simulacra, simulacra are copies that depict things that either had no original or that no longer have an original. If we think about Walter Benjamin's artworks without auras, that's very similar to what Baudrillard is talking about. Baudrillard critiques trompe-l'œil because for him it is an art form of pure appearances. There's no nature, no personality, nothing essential in the trompe-l'œil. No landscapes, skies, vanishing points, or natural light. Everything here is an artifact, a vestige of some kind, a non-real experience, a simulation. Again, we are coming back to the word of simulation. Trompe-l'œil is then also an analogy of the society's capacity to erect spectacles. These spectacles are lacking their referentiality. There's no referentiality to the sex, to the real experience, to the visceral experience, right? Lived experience. Baudrillard gives us a story which is supposed to encapsulate what it means to attain seduction. So he says, consider the story of the soldier who meets death at a crossing in the marketplace and believes he saw him make a menacing gesture in his direction. He rushes to the king's palace and asks the king for the best horse in order that he might flee during the night far from death, as far as Samarkand, that's the city, that's the name of the city. Upon which the king summons Death to the palace and reproaches him for having frightened one of his best servants. But Death, astonished, replies, I didn't mean to frighten him. It was just that I was surprised to see the soldier here when we had a rendezvous tomorrow in Samarkand, the city to which the soldier was running because he was afraid that Death was giving him a menacing gesture. The soldier then is properly cheated and tricked. He selected a totally arbitrary gesture and made a big deal out of it. He himself seduced Death's gesture by thinking that it was significant, and in turn he himself was seduced. He undertook to carry out his own faith. Because soldier was naive enough to trust Death's signifier, he was seduced, and therefore now he lives within his own faith, which is absurd and very paradoxical in a way. I think it's a marvelous story, and it puts the seduction into a very nice perspective. This is a great example of how seduction works, really. If you think about the symbolic discourse from the subject's perspective and a kind of a trivial symptom that just appears from nowhere, details can be exaggerated, blown out of the proportion. Consequently, the subject fixates on this detail, forgets all truths and routine events. The subject suddenly suspends reality and desires the most. The subject desires the most insignificant, the most frivolous of fixations. However, the benefit of such seduction is the following. The subject is no longer caught up in the logistics of pleasure. The extremes of pleasure and discontent become more real and more pronounced for the subject. The subject no longer sits there waiting for a quick dose of pleasure. The subject is enchanted. She is seduced by the game. Don't you want to be seduced by the game at this point? Sounds very exciting. Coming back to secrets. Baudrillard says that secrets are only relevant as long as they're not revealed, which is a rather basic thought. But it carries a lot of weight in this book. You can only be seduced if the desired object is never revealed. If one is seduced, the secret conceals such binaries as active, passive, interior, exterior, subject, object, and the rest of such phenomena. Everything is concealed because it's a secret. What about the factor of suspense? Within seduction, the state of suspense becomes also essential. Baudrillard refers to Kierkegaard's Diary of the Seducer. When referring to the book, for Baudrillard, it's important to have the moment that Kierkegaard describes, when the girl, Cordelia, is in disarray even though she knows that something awaits her. This is the moment of high intensity. It is a spiritual moment in Kierkegaard's sense. Now, let's talk about the obvious stuff. The fear of being seduced. We struggle to confirm ourselves in our own truth. We want to make sure that our perspective is right, concrete, solid. As people who think and make reasonable arguments, we fight against that which seeks to seduce us. In this struggle, all means are acceptable, right? We try to seduce the other in order not to be seduced ourselves. We pretend to be seduced in order to cut all seduction short. Therefore, within our society, all signs are without faith, without affect or history. These signs are terrified at the idea of signifying, just, Baudrillard says, as a hysteric who is terrified at the idea of being seduced. Seduction is something that seizes hold of all pleasures. Seduction makes us susceptible, vulnerable, unprotected. We can only be perverts because perverts are cold when it comes to sex. They transmute sex and sexuality into a ritual career as sort of a ceremonial abstraction. Think about Sade. There's no real seduction. There's just ceremonial abstraction. It's like a conveyor of bodies. Perversion is a frozen challenge then, while seduction is a living challenge. Seduction is shifting, it's fleeting and ephemeral. Perversion, monotonous and interminable. Well, okay, let's talk about the more important parts of the book, I guess. What about the political destiny of seduction? When we talk about politics and factions, assemblages within it, it is important to note that these are two instances of the game. The same game that is played in Nabokov's Lolita, in Kierkegaard's Diary of the Seducer, or in party politics in general. Baudrillard here distinguishes in a very Caesarean way between the diachronic law and the synchronic game. Diachronic law is something that functions in the background, while the game is something that conjures up its own localized rules. If one abandons the game, say in a breakup or in a political disagreement, one might postulate the personal advantage as an alibi. However, in reality, the participant cheats in order to escape seduction. He cheats because he's afraid of being seduced. People are unable to commit to seduction, and that's the problem for Baudrillard. People are overly afraid of being seduced. They don't want to commit to seduction. Baudrillard also critiques Deleuze's notion of ideal game, the egalitarian sort of a game. That kind of a game, that kind of an interaction between participants is impossible for Baudrillard, because in all games there are some reciprocities, hierarchies. role-playing, and illusion, and suspension of the truth. Right? Coming back to the society of today, we can say that security has become our destiny. That's one of the reasons why we people, or as Baudrillard perceives the people, we don't want to be seduced because we want to be secure. Therefore, for us, the social is without seduction. The social is without seduction. In what other ways we are able to experience pseudo-seduction? Well, Baudrillard lists. There are game systems, electronic games in general, microsystems. There are all kinds of gadgets. These are soft drugs, as Baudrillard calls them. We play, we touch and experience the technology with, tactile euphoria. We take these games, these Nintendo Switch or whatever you have, or PSP, or just video games in general, any kind of a gadgetry, this, that, I don't know, these. We take it, and there's a lot of tactile euphoria that brings us pseudo seduction. In all these cases, there's no more space left for seduction, real seduction. Because all pleasurable activities are instances of, as we mentioned before, premature ejaculation. Lastly, I just want to quote Baudrillard himself, because I think that this paragraph is very picturesque and very telling. The world is naked, the king is naked, and things are clear. All of production and truth itself are directed towards disclosure, the unbearable truth of sex being but the most recent consequence. Luckily, at bottom, there is nothing to it. And seduction still holds, in the face of truth, a most sibyllin response, which is that perhaps we wish to uncover the truth because it is too difficult to imagine it naked. Naked. Seduction can, at least, imagine the truth naked. Hence, we shouldn't be afraid of being seduced. Being seduced means committing to the illusion, being enchanted, living to the fullest. Well, that was quite a ride. In my opinion, this is a real gem, a proper gem of a book. It doesn't happen often that the text itself becomes an application of the theory. The text itself is seductive. You have to grapple with it. And you can do so only with the sincere commitment in mind. And remember that within seduction there's a lot of commitment. This text is writerly, as Roland Barthes would have said. Thank you everybody for watching Flicker Theories. As a conclusion, I just want to say this. People, seduce and be seduced away, because there's more to desire than mere masturbation. Have a good day.